Okay, thanks everybody for joining. Thanks, Connie, for putting together a really nice PowerPoint that we're going to be going through. What I usually do and what I plan to do today is to go through all the slides before I start taking any questions. That way, if we want to make sure everything gets mentioned and then we don't get stuck on one slide and not hear from the other issues. So this is crossover. I think I took a quick look at who is joining us today, and I think most everybody understands what that means. But just in case you don't, it means the House by the end of today has to finish all its bills, and the Senate has to finish all its bills. And crossover refers to the fact that they cross over to the other side. It is good to keep in mind that just because your bill passed the House doesn't mean it's going to pass the Senate and vice versa. And just because your bill passed unanimously does not mean it's going to pass the other side. They actually do scrutinize each other's bills. And so that's just something to keep in mind. And of course, the next big point in the process will be when the legislature finishes in the beginning of March, and then everything goes to the governor. And then the governor has, depending on when the bill comes to him, has time to do something, either amend it or veto it. And of course, this session, there's been a heck of a lot of discussion about whether the governors are going to veto this and that. The reason everybody's talking about that is if the governor vetoes something, there's pretty much no way the legislature can stop him, because they have to have a 2/3 vote, and most people feel like his party will stick with him. The other reason I think a lot of people talking about vetoes is the governor has shown that he's willing to veto a lot of bills in the past. So I think that's the other reason why there's a lot of discussion. So let's start. Let's go ahead and move forward, Connie. Yeah, we always like to sort of point out that poverty is not something that has to be inevitable. And that's one of the reasons why we work on policy issues, is because it's a lot you can do about it, that we could do about it. Now, this slide here is hard to see, but it's all our advocates. We have 15 folks that are working on a lot of different issues at the General Assembly. And I just have to take a moment to say that they have all done an excellent, excellent, excellent job so far. I've heard nothing but good things from everybody. Next slide. And these are our focus areas. We tried to take all of our issues and sort of jam them into these focus areas. Sometimes they fit, sometimes it's a little hard to fit them in, but keeping people housed, help children and families thrive, stop the spread of abusive junk fees, and improve access to justice. And all of these issues are equally important to us. Next. So under keeping people in their homes, here are 5 of the bills that we've been working on. And the bills that we will mention, by the way, some we asked the legislators to put in, others legislators put them in, and then we started working with them on them. So I'm not going to delineate those for you. It's too much, but we have a lot of bills in on landlord tenant issues. And a lot of these issues bubbled up from tenants' rights groups who told us what was important to them and that sort of thing. So we tried to, and also from, legal aid attorneys around the state telling us what's important. We try not to just impose Christy put a nice comment in the chat. Over a dozen tenant-friendly bills have passed the House and are heading to the Senate. So here's 5 of them for you. The first one has to do with requiring landlords to offer payment plans to tenants owing no more than 1 month's rent, which, I mean, some of these things you're going to think to yourself, well, why don't landlords already do this? I don't know. But a lot of these things really are common sense. And it's best for everyone if we evict fewer people. And then the second one is something we've tried to do for years and years. Delegate Price from Newport News has been our champion on this. Extremely important to extend from 5 to 14 days the pay or quit period during which a tenant can pay the rent and prevent the landlord filing an eviction case. The third one is Delegate Cousins gives tenants the ability to sue a landlord who isn't making essential repairs to their units, even if they are behind on rent. Landlords not fixing things is a huge problem. One thing sort of off topic, but we did the Poverty Law Center, along with Consumer Litigation Associates and Kelly Guzzo, filed a big class action in Newport News, where an investor from from New Jersey, bought a big tower and basically had the place got condemned because they didn't fix anything. It's a huge problem for people. It causes all kinds of health problems. So that's why we are working on that. And the next issue, make it unlawful for landlords to charge a tenant a separate fee every time the tenant makes a request for maintenance services. Legally, the landlord's supposed to be doing this anyway. This also, by the way, could fall under abuse and junk fees, because it's just a lot of people have a lot of landlords in particular have a lot of junk fees. I was actually talking to my wife last night, who pays her aunt's rent, and it's just impossible to figure out what they're charging her. It seems to me that the landlords want to say the rent is $1,320 a month, but then in reality, it's a lot more than that. It's more like $1,450, because they add all these other things, including like 2 gas fees, 2 electric fees, community fees, you name it. So it's a problem. This bill tries to address some of that. And then I think the last one is requires DHCD to translate its model landlord and tenant form into 5 non-English language, most common in Virginia. So all important bills, all have passed the House. Next. Health and safety at risk. These are 2 important bills. Roughly, these bills, of course, have, they go in as one type of thing, and then they get shifted around and compromises and that sort of thing. But both these bills have passed. The House bill has passed the House, and the Senate bill has passed the Senate. And what we've got is no shutoffs during. This has to do with utility shutoffs, and the bills say that there's no shutoffs during extreme temperatures, no shutoffs on weekends and state holidays, because you can't get it shut back on by paying your bill when the power company's closed, and then no shutoffs during public health emergencies. Again, these seem like common sense things, and some of the utilities claim they already do this, but we know from experience that that's not the case. And there needs to be a clear policy that everyone understands, including the customer. Next. This one is entitled Unacceptable Choices for Virginia Seniors. These are budget amendments, so we don't know at this moment. The budget has about another week to go before the House approves its bill and the Senate approves its budget, and then they cross over and they reject each other's budgets, and then they work it out. So it's a long time before we know whether these things will be in the budget. But we wanted to mention SNAP has become a hot issue this year, because a lot of seniors lost over $258 monthly SNAP benefits. That was a pandemic-related program, and we're now only receiving $23 a month. You can imagine what a hardship that causes. And these budget amendments try to increase that to $50 a month, small and modest increase. Next. The next one, when children go hungry. A House bill and a Senate bill initially provided free meals for all public school students in the state. Again, an issue that the Virginia Poverty Law Center has been working on for many, many years. And we've made a lot of progress on this. Particularly, Senator Rome should be congratulated for all the work she's done on this. But the bill was recommended to lay on the table, but there is going to be a work group that studies. And believe me, when Senator Rome is not going to let this drop, so we're really hoping this keeps moving forward. And I like Senator Rome's comment there at the bottom. This is about making sure that every kid who goes to school gets fed. No questions asked. Here. Um, Kids are eligible, and we don't need to determine whether they're worthy or not. Next slide. That's kind of what our next slide says. We need to stop choosing child poverty. So guardianship reform. This issue has been around for years and years too. A lot of tinkering about this. Adult guardianship, and we're talking about adult guardianship when a person loses their capacity to take care of themselves, sometimes in small ways and sometimes in big ways. But there ought to be sometimes you ought to be able to get your rights back in certain circumstances, but it can be hard because it's a court process. Delegate Hope's bill creates an informal process rather than a formal petition, which I think makes a whole lot of sense. We passed the House unanimously, it's moved into the Senate. Again, Senator Rome requires that private guardians receive training for the first time in how to protect the person's rights and act on their behalf. Extremely important. A lot of people get appointed guardians or guardians ad litem, who's the person who comes to court on their behalf, and with no training, and it's not intuitive. You have to know a lot. There's a lot you can learn before you should be doing that. So next slide. All right, 13,000 children shouldn't have to wait for health care. This is also a House bill and a Senate bill. It's being called Cover All Kids. There's a lot of groups working on this. We are not the lead. We are participating as part of a national movement to provide Medicaid health coverage for all children, regardless of their immigration status. Although both sides passed the bill out of its first committee, only the Senate bill made it out of appropriations. This will be the second year the Senate has likely going to put it in their budget. So we think this is extremely important, as well as many other people. You can say all you want about immigration, but it doesn't make sense to withhold health care from kids who come here. Okay, next slide, Connie. So crucial legislation for Virginia families. Delegate McClure's bill is legislation to improve the quality of legal services for court-appointed attorneys. We took this issue on a few years ago and now are making some progress. But in court-appointed attorneys for parents in child dependency foster care cases. This bill helps children get out of foster care faster. And it's has not yet passed the House, but it certainly looks like it's on its way. Probably passed today. The second bill is Delegate Martinez, brand new delegate, and McClure is as well. Ensures the guardians ad litem that are appointed to look out for the best interests of children. They directly petition clerks for petitions that require them to look at problems that are occurring, that they see occurring. This is something that came to us from, I believe, from the legal aid attorneys. Next slide. So stop the spread of abusive junk fees. So President Biden made this a pretty big issue about a year ago, when he brought it up in his State of the Union address. And I think there isn't anybody out there who doesn't know what we're talking about here, because all of us have been getting thoroughly disgusted with this stuff. And it's this bit of, here's the price, but here's all these extra things at the end or somewhere along the process that are required, but you didn't tell me about it in the first place. And I think on the national level, when they've been talking about it, it's a lot about resort fees and airlines. But for our purposes, representing low-income folks, it's really rental housing is the biggest problem. Cell phones. I mean, our clients, most of our clients have cell phones. They don't have any other kind of service. They don't have any laptops and things. Even medical fees. Some hospitals are charging, and doctors' offices are charging extra fees for using their facilities. Tax preparation services and just routine banking services. They're particularly harmful to low-income people and can hide, like within an automated highway toll payments. You name it, it's everywhere. There are two bills on this. The Senate bill did pass. This bill drew a ton of attention on both sides. There's also a House bill, which unfortunately did not make it through. But there were just, everybody was picked at this bill. Both patrons, Senator McCarthy and Delegate McClure, are brand new legislators who stood up to a barrage of attacks on this. Did a wonderful job. And the Senate bill has gone through. We'll see what happens with it. I think the legislators at their peril don't pass this, and I think a lot of people are very upset about this kind of thing. So we'll see what happens going forward. But next.
From our ready to kind of
So next slide is called "Beware the Zombie Mortgage." It references, back in 2000, before 2008, when we had the mortgage crisis, many homeowners were financing homes with two mortgages, a first and a second. You may or may not remember the absolute chaos that took place in the mortgage industry that many people thought almost brought down the entire economy. This was when President Bush was leaving and President Obama was coming in. So there was a lot of stuff going on, and so a lot of second mortgages just sort of disappeared. A lot of people thought that they were done with their second mortgage. They never heard anything more about it. And now all of a sudden they're rising from the dead. That's the reference to zombie. And they're trying to even foreclose on people, even though they've never sent them a statement or anything for sometimes as long as 10 years. And they want to charge all the back interest for that 10 years. And what this bill says, basically, if you did not inform the homeowner that you still claimed this debt and that you were right and how much interest you were charging and that sort of thing, then you can't get it when you foreclose. That bill has passed unanimously through the House. So next slide. So class action, did we skip one? No, we did not. No, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Sorry, Connie. So class action lawsuits, so you can do a class action lawsuit in Virginia, but you have to have a federal claim and go to federal court. And that works a lot of times. That's how VPLC teamed up with several private firms and took hundreds of millions of dollars from illegal payday lenders who were making loans online. But there's also lots of things that are done in a big way that are only violating state law, and you can't go after it unless you have the ability to do class action. There's only two states that don't allow this: Virginia and Mississippi. Delegate Simon's bill passed unanimously through the House, and the Senate bill, Senator Surville has also passed. There's a lot of opposition to this, though. So go ahead. Next slide. So the next slide has to do with sneaky probate loans. Delegate Coiner called me about this. She learned about this before the session. Basically, these so-called probate lenders check court records and contact relatives of the deceased and offer them money to unlock your inheritance and empower your future. They actually send folks a check. And then on the back, it says this is not a loan. Of course, it is a loan. And Delegate Corner put this bill in. It basically forced these companies to acknowledge, basically it says that these are loans. You can say they're not loans all you want. You got to follow our usury laws and comply with our Virginia Fairness and Lending Act, which we just passed a few years ago. And that passed unanimously. So it's on to the Senate. Next slide. Unemployment insurance. So there are a lot has been happening in this area. House Bill 14, Delegate Ware, and Senate Bill 381 Eben, ensure that the Virginia Employment Commission receives critical information from employers and claimants so the agency can accurately determine when claimants are entitled to benefits. Senator Evans' bill was passed unanimously, and we expect Delegate Ware's bill will be voted on today, and we hope that will pass as well. Senate Bill 362 is a 5-year statute of limitations on collecting non-fraudulent overpayments. We discovered that a lot of people were hearing from VEC as much as 8, 9, 10 years after getting an overpayment. That was not their fault, that they had to repay it. Doesn't make any sense. And then there's a couple of bills on the bottom there would make the temporary overpayment waiver legislation passed during the pandemic. And Senator Bagby's bill passed unanimously with a 4-year sunset clause, meaning it would end after 4 years, and then Delegate Tran's bill will be voted on today. So these are all very important changes to unemployment insurance. All of this is really driven by the legal aid community who's seen all these problems. We see the clients. We sued the Virginia Employment Commission a few years ago to try to clean up some of this mess, but we continue to see problems, and we're trying to fix it through policy in some circumstances. So that's what we're trying to do here. So next slide. So funding to break the barriers to language access. More than 1 million Virginians have difficulties communicating due to language, hearing, or visual difficulties. For many, that translates to inability to access important information. The Poverty Law Center is advocating for all state agencies to get the resources it takes to provide comprehensive language access. So this is a budget issue, and budget items are sponsored by Delegate Tran and Senator Hashmi to address the needs of residents, including website translation services, expanded phone menus, and access to interpreters. Next slide. All right, improving access to justice. There's these first two bills, Delegate Hernandez and Senator Bagby put in, help facilitate Virginia's compliance with federal law, barring collection of criminal traffic court fines and fees from an individual's Social Security income. Interesting, we used the interesting choice of words there. Virginia's not following federal law, so we need to help facilitate their compliance with federal law. It's ridiculous to try to collect criminal and traffic fines from somebody's Social Security. Delegate hopes, and it's also, by the way, federal law already. And both bills have passed their respective chambers. Delegate hopes, House Bill 7, we already mentioned 786. I like the wording in here. If Britney Spears required a national movement to access the court, imagine how hard it is for everyone else. Well said. And then the last one, Delegate Hope's bill, clarifies public benefits, circuit court appeals, and that's a little bit wonky maybe, but it's important to legal aid attorneys and other folks who represent people who have wrongfully been turned down for public benefits. They need to have access to the courts to get relief and to stop agencies from continuing to violate the law. Next slide, please. Okay, so just some other issues we're watching and sometimes testifying on and sometimes talking to legislators about. The child tax credit, which we think is extremely important, provides a income tax credit to folks to help raise their kids. We all know what's happening in the world of childcare and having to pay for that. Obviously, we're in favor of the minimum wage increase. There's some bills on that. There's a lot of data privacy issues, which we've traditionally worked on, so we are sort of paying attention there. Those are not our bills, but we've worked on them. The towing issues, this is about the 3rd or 4th year in a row that I've watched these issues and sometimes participated. There are just some towing companies, particularly this one company up in Northern Virginia. It's really very abusive in towing cars that are not really causing anybody any problem, but they're just trying to raise fees. And there's a lot of people very upset about it. There is a bill, I think, that's passed the House. Basically, it gives localities the authority to try to deal with this. And then finally, Medicaid waivers so folks can get in-home health care and other kinds of care that they need waivers for. And I think that's it for our slides. Go ahead and you can do the next slide. Just some ways you can get involved. So I've got lots of experts on here. I think I did it exactly half an hour, if I'm not mistaken. Well, 3 minutes, well, 3 minutes fast. So anybody have any questions? I haven't checked the chat, but is anybody checking the chat? Can tell me whether there's questions.
Yes, it looks like there aren't any questions in the chat yet, but folks feel free to put your questions there or unmute and ask them.
So part of it is we have a lot of, I can see we have a lot of really knowledgeable people. Oh, in the chat, I think there's some like additional information. Thank you folks for putting that in there. So you may want to take a look at that. All right, no questions?
Well, I have one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Spear, I'm Reese Shear from Washington County, Southwest Virginia Nuclear Watch. We're an environmental justice coalition. We in Southwest Virginia were extremely disappointed when Ms. Wiggins articulated a neutral VPCLL position on two bills which change SCC policy to permit customer reimbursement funding for small modular nuclear reactors before they are completed and generating. Both bills passed in the critical committee review by a single vote. And one of these bills, well, both bills permit SMRs, multiple SMRs at a single site, up to 500 megawatts, which is well above what the DOE says is standard range for SMRs. And customers can be on the hook for these costs, like they were for North Anna 3 for $300 million. They're very expensive. The flagship SMNR new scale failed in November, despite $2 billion in federal funding in the pipeline for it. The governor is planning a project which would be in Wise County, Virginia, called Data Ridge, that would be powered by these small modular nuclear reactors. It would be for data centers, hydrogen electrolysis, carbon injection into the ground, all on unstable mine lands. And supporting these two bills promotes this kind of activity and leaves customers stuck with the speculative investment. We're acting like an investment bank, an angel investor for Dominion Energy and Appalachian Power. Here in Southwest Virginia, this month we had rate increases of 10% settled on us. So I'm hoping that you all will reconsider your position on HB 1491 and SB 454, which are each headed to the opposite chamber.
All right, I don't think Dana is on here. Carmen, do you have any comment on that?
Mr. Shearer, hi, Carmen Bingham. I work with Dana Wiggins on energy issues here for VPLC. We did take a neutral position on those bills simply because we were trying to mitigate as much as we could the cost impact. We did, I know Dana did, because we prepared her statement together, talk about the fact that this was the first time the legislature was actually going to put in code cost upon the ratepayers without any guarantee of a single kilowatt hour being produced.
Right.
We were trying very hard to just make sure that the legislature knew that we were not advocating one way or the other on fuel source. We were simply trying to write the process by which the SCC would dictate, or would at least adjudicate how those costs would be recovered from the utility in the event they did decide to explore an SMR. And so our preference is the House bill, because it is very specific to just Appalachian Power. And they're looking to explore the option in sites either in Southwest Virginia or in West Virginia, but making sure that we don't recover any costs that are not associated with the actual construction until the construction is started. We also made sure that there was a provision such that if they did do some pre-site planning, that those costs would be offset by the sale of that property if they decided not to go forward with the project.
However, those costs are minimal compared to preparing a design and engineering.
Yeah,
So
the design and engineering are the minimal cost. What the Senate bill has in it that the House bill does not, which is why we prefer the House bill, is the Senate bill includes federal licensing. And we believe that actually should be part of the construction cost. So there are no construction costs in the House bill, which is specific again to just APCO. And we have asked the senator to please consider removing that from his bill, so that it is only on the pre-planning, the site assessment, and everything that they have to do before they actually can apply for a permit from the federal government.
well, that's still a lot of money because we're talking about new
Yes.
designs here, and the governor wants new designs. So, and those are
Well,
risky.
sorry to
New
interrupt.
scale just
Let me interrupt
Just-
if y'all want to talk offline, that's fine. I just don't want to let this go on too long
Right.
on one issue. But just know that on energy issues, we do limit what we work on. We have worked for many years to try to make power bills more affordable. I think we've made a lot of progress. Dominion is a very difficult and APCO are very difficult adversaries. I think we've done great work in that area. We don't typically get involved in climate issues just because we only have but so many things that we can work on. So, any other questions?
Is there a way to get a copy of the slideshow you used?
Yeah, I think, Mara, can we just send that out to everybody? What's the deal on that?
Yes, yeah. So we'll send a follow-up email with the recording from today, and we'd be happy to share the slides as well.
And I'll see Anna and Carmen's contact information are in the chat.
Great. And it looks like we have another question. Someone has their hand raised.
Yeah, whoever that is, I can't see it, but go ahead.
This is Bucky Boone. Jay, I hope that you all, as you think about the issue that Reese raised, don't think of that as a ratepayer issue rather than a climate issue, because it's building in automatic costs that go to the ratepayers. The investors sort of get a free ride on the back of ratepayers. And so low-income ratepayers are going to pay for this no investment.
Believe me, Bucky, we know that issue well, and we've not only worked on those issues at the General Assembly, but we've hired private attorneys to represent us at the SCC. So yeah, we completely understand those issues, and thank you for raising them. And there's been some discussion about the language access budgets. So Sheila, do you want to say something else about that?
Yeah, I just put it in the chat. So there is 2.5 million for FY25 and FY26, each 2.5 million. And just to keep in mind, there was 2.5 million for each of the 2 years, FY23 and FY24. some point during FY 23, we realized that the governor was not giving that information or giving those dollars out to those agencies that were supposed to get them. So that money disappeared. So anyway, it's in response to Ali's question, it's not for courts, it's for state agencies to improve language access services. And I put the budget item in the chat if you want to look at it yourselves.
Yeah, I see the discussion about court interpretation. Interesting discussion, and you feel free to also continue that offline. One thing I saw this year a lot of was on a lot of tenants organizations had folks come and testify, and the Spanish speakers were translated and very, very well. And I completely forget. Christy, help me out. What's his name that does the job?
Gustavo from Legal Aid Justice
Yeah,
Center
thank you.
acted as a translator.
Yeah, he just does a great job of doing that, and it's really nice to see those folks get access to the policy, folks, and be able to tell their story and not be totally intimidated.
I'd like to thank you all for doing a fabulous job. It just inspires me to see the stuff that you're doing.
Well, thank you, Don. All right, there's nothing else. We will let you all go. Thanks, everybody, for joining.